After playing Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, I finally decided to bite the bullet and try its sequel, which I was afraid of playing mainly due to its seemingly complicated combat system. After Xenoblade 3 was announced, I realized I'd better play it fast before 3, which combines both games' worlds, was released. Later on, when it came time to discuss Xenoblade 3 in my 2022 game ranking video, I realized I wanted to directly compare the two games. I have a segment on Xenoblade 1 in my 2020 video, and I was going to have a segment on 3 in the upcoming 2022 video, but I'd never put my equally extensive thoughts on 2 on my channel. It would have been awkward to jam my opinions on 2 into 3's segment, but I had way too much to say comparing all 3 games to exclude ramblings on the prior entries. So I decided to dedicate a separate video, the one you're watching right now, to both Xenoblade 2 and 3, with a bit of my opinions on 1 sprinkled in for the sake of comparison. Before we get started though, I do want to mention something regarding my video quality. My first few years, I simply took random footage of myself playing the game I was discussing and placed my voice over it, so the video didn't always match up with whatever aspect of the game I was talking about. In the past few videos, I've worked on upping my game to the level of an actual YouTuber, getting video clips of the subject I'm discussing to match up with my audio. I was really proud of these videos, and although my audio quality wasn't perfect, I think visually these videos do a far better job of expressing what I'm trying to say, as I was actually providing a visual aid for those who hadn't played the games. Now here's why I'm going back to the old way for this video. 2022 was just too busy. In fact, there are 2 games I'm not going to be including on my list, as I haven't had the time to touch them yet. If I were to try and get video matching every point I touch on here, this video wouldn't come out until halfway through the year, or even past that, and my 2022 ranking video, that probably wouldn't hit YouTube until 2024. So for this video, you can mostly listen to it like a podcast. Aside from a couple moments where I specifically have to show something visual for my ramblings to make sense, the video I'm showing is probably not going to be related to whatever aspect of the game I'm discussing. I want to start with a sort of review of Xenoblade 2. It is important to note here, I didn't buy any of the DLC or Torna until after beating the game, and I haven't reopened it yet to mess with any of that either. So what we're talking about here is base game Xenoblade 2. Anything locked behind DLC, I didn't have the pleasure of experiencing for myself. Before I get to the meat of the game, I want to discuss a few issues I had that wouldn't really fit into my longer ramblings about the story and gameplay. It's nothing that'll ruin the experience for most Switch owners, but it is worth mentioning Xenoblade 2 is susceptible to frame rate issues and slowdown. The tutorials in this game are not great, and you can't even revisit them like you could in 1. This is the kind of game where you practically have to learn from outside sources to really get it, which is pretty rare for a single player game. You've probably heard plenty of takes on the voice acting. While the acting doesn't sound great at first, I'm happy to say I quite like the performances further into the game. I feel like the scenes had to have been recorded in chronological order, as most characters start out notably weak, but sound more realized after the VAs had time to get to know who they're voicing. The first game's side quests were fairly short, but not all too memorable. 2 improved upon the importance of quests, revealing more about specific characters or the world as a whole, but the issue I had in 2 is that quests would drag on and on, regardless of the mission's importance. It felt like with half the quests in that game, I'd complete an objective only to be told my job wasn't done yet. 1 had some multi-tiered side quest storylines, but they would usually be comprised of multiple quests following the sequence. 2 takes what would have been 5 quests in 1 and forces you to do all of them for 1 reward. 2 guides you to quests by marking them on the map and handing you a compass that aligns when you're heading toward it. There is an arrow indicating whether the objective is above or below you, but it's not always clear in areas with lots of elevational variation. You'll have a small handful of drivers, those are the player characters, and each driver can summon multiple blade partners to work alongside in battle. We'll get to how this mechanic works in battle in a second, but for now all that's important to know is that each driver can equip 3 blades at a time. Throughout the game, you'll find field skill checks where you'll need to meet a certain level for whatever skills it requires in order to destroy or interact with something. For example, you may find a gust of wind that requires you to know Wind Mastery level 3 in order to jump inside it to reach a high up area. You can meet these requirements either by having a blade that meets the required level, or by equipping multiple blades which add up to that level. For example, equipping a blade with Wind Mastery level 3 and another with Wind Mastery level 1 in order to meet a skill check that requires Wind Mastery level 4. I think these checks are a nice way to reward the player for leveling up a certain blade's affinity chart, but unfortunately these become more of a nuisance as you have to have the required blades currently equipped. Because these checks can reach levels of 4 or above, you'll often have to pause the game, rearrange your party to equip blades that will meet those requirements, get through the skill check, and then re-equip the blades you actually want to use in battle. This is incredibly annoying. Instead of forcing the player to rearrange their entire party, sometimes even switching out drivers as blades are tied to the driver that summoned them, there should be a system that automatically scans all your blades and checks if any possible combination of 9 blades reaches the requirement. But of course, the main course of this game and the way you'll be experiencing most of the story, other than simple traversal, is the battle system. And I'm going to do my best to try and explain it like I would to someone who's never touched the game before. You start by targeting an enemy and pressing A to draw your weapon. This will cause the battle palette to appear. As soon as you move close enough to an enemy, you'll begin auto-attacking. Your character will attack without you pressing anything, just like in the first game. Unlike the first game, your character will no longer attack while moving. I initially didn't like this change, and although I do think it had a positive effect on the battle system too, which I'll go over in a second, I do still believe this creates some awkwardness and extra risk when repositioning yourself, as all you can do is sluggishly run into place. It does feel at times like you're wasting precious time. As you don't control auto-attacking, your main way of influencing the battle will be your arts. In 2, you'll only have 3 arts available to you at any given moment. Each art is assigned to the X, Y, and B buttons, and so long as the art icon is lit up, you can press the corresponding button to use it. Rather than just refilling over time like in 1, your arts will recharge whenever an auto attack connects with the enemy. An interesting result of this system, paired with the fact you no longer attack while moving, is you can play around to refill your arts faster. Your character's auto attacks will occur in a set repeating pattern of 3. For example, Rex using a sword will slice horizontally, then vertically, then he'll stab. And he'll repeat the cycle until you have him do something, or an enemy causes him to stop somehow. Interestingly, the time between his horizontal and vertical slice is longer than the time between him moving and letting out his initial horizontal slash. This means you can repeatedly move the joystick just a tap to make him auto-attack faster, thereby filling up his arts quicker. Arts are the closest thing Xenoblade has to the moves you'd have in a more traditional turn-based RPG. Some are simply attacks, others are attacks with special status effects, others have only status effects like healing your party. Some of the most important effects in the game are the ones used in driver combos: break, topple, launch, and smash. Break and topple returning from the first game. These effects are exclusively to be used in sequence. For example, hitting an enemy with an art that inflicts break will allow you or one of your AI control party members to topple it, knocking it over. Then you can launch it into the air and immediately after that smash it into the dirt for massive damage. Now may be a good time to mention that your AI allies feel smarter in this game than they did in 1. I felt like the predecessor's party members would sometimes miss a clear chance to topple an enemy I'd inflicted with break, or make other goofy mistakes. 2s feel like they generally will execute the next art in a driver combo whenever possible. Alongside the ability to cancel your auto attacks by tapping the control stick, you can cancel an auto attack into an art by hitting the art button right as an auto attack connects. This has the bonus of filling up your special gauge more, which is a mechanic I'll explain in a second. Later on, you can even cancel arts into other arts, and cancel arts into specials. Before I explain specials and the deeper battle mechanics, I want to compliment the feel of this battle system. In Xenoblade 1, it could sometimes feel like I was just looking at numbers on the screen. There wasn't really tactical feedback from my actions. 2 feels more like a cross between an RTS game and an action RPG. Even though I'm not simply pressing the A button to make my character swing their sword, I do have more agency over when they attack, and the mechanic of rewarding the player for using arts right when one attack connects inherently feels nicer than just spamming an art as soon as it lights up and I'm in position. One final thing I will mention before explaining the significance of specials is that you can have 3 blades equipped per driver at any time, and you can switch between your blades mid-battle using the D-pad. Blades in combat essentially act as your weapons, and also determine your role. Some blades are attackers, some are tanks, and some are healers. This actually means you can have one driver fulfill multiple roles depending on the blades you have equipped, and you can switch between multiple different playstyles as different blades have different weapons. You're not tied to solely being an attacker or healer for a full battle. You can become whatever you need to in the moment. Each blade also has a set element, so you can build your team to try and have as many different elemental attacks available as possible. I will explain the significance of this shortly. Back to mechanics, using your arts fills up your special gauge just as auto attacks fill up your arts gauges. Once it fills up enough, you can press A to use a special attack, which of course is stronger than any old art. Where specials differ from standard arts, aside from power, is that using more arts can charge them up even more. You'll start with level 1 special, but if you don't use it and you continue to use arts, that can become a level 2 special. Continue using arts without pressing A and it'll become a level 3 special. Then there's this whole mechanic called affinity, which is honestly not too important to discuss in my opinion, beyond knowing that if it's high enough and you have your special gauge at level 3, it can become an even more powerful level 4 special. Now here's where the battle system starts to sound a bit scary, but I promise it's not as complex as it sounds. Every blade has a specific element. For example, Pyra is fire, while Mia's main blade drill mark is water. Upon using any special, you'll begin what's known as a blade combo, and two things will appear on your screen. A timer right above the enemy health bar, and a branching menu in the top right of the screen showing you which elemental attacks you can use in what order to continue the blade combo. The timer is simple, it shows you how much time you have to pull off the next special in order to continue the blade combo. Oh, and real quick, if you perform a driver combo while this timer is still taken down, or vice versa you activate a special while the enemy is under the effect of a driver combo, you'll perform what's known as a fusion combo. This is one of the fastest ways to finish off the weaker enemies. As for the branching chart, its first row will depend on the element of the blade you just used a special with. So if you used a special with Pyra, it'll be fire. From here you can use a level 2 special or above, followed by a level 3 special or above, and this will complete a blade combo. Your allies can also help with this, as you can force them to activate their specials whenever they're available with the ZL and ZR buttons. For example, let's say you, as Rex, use any special with Pyra. The second row in this chart shows fire or water, meaning you can either use a level 2 or above water special or a fire special. If you have Nia use a level 2 water special, you can then focus on the third row, where we can see you now have the options of another fire or an ice special. Now you can either have a party member use a level 3 or 4 fire or ice special, or build up a level 3 or 4 fire or ice special with Rex. Again, that's a fire special of any level, followed by a level 2 or above water special, followed by a level 3 or 4 fire or ice special. If you followed along thus far, you may be wondering the advantage of doing this. Aside from the damage of the specials themselves, the final special will place an elemental orb on the enemy of whatever element the final blade in the combo was. So if you used a combo of Earth, Fire, Wind, you would place a Wind orb on the enemy. It's important to note you can only have one orb of each type on an enemy at a time, so you wouldn't be able to add a second Wind orb. Oh, and real quick, pulling off a blade combo like this will also inflict the enemy with a specific status condition, but in my experience this is barely worth paying attention to aside from one boss. Before discussing orbs, I'd like to chime in and add my opinion on the party members again. I found that they're mostly competent at switching to the correct blade when I'm trying to set up a blade combo. Unfortunately, they don't always pull this off. Sometimes I'll purposefully wait so I can get my own special gauge up to a level 3 or 4 to pull off the finishing blow, only for my partner to switch to the element of the opposite path I'm trying to take right before I want to have them use their special. I'd still say they allowed me to pull off the correct combo more often than not, however. The orbs you place on enemies by finishing a blade combo are very important for their role in chain attacks, which are, in my opinion, the most important aspect of the battle system once you finally unlock them in Chapter 3. Maybe a bit too important, actually. Chain attacks essentially pause time, preventing the enemies from doing any damage to you. Once you start a chain attack, the ball is in your court until it's over. Each chain attack round you can perform 3 specials in a row, picking one blade per driver. You're only guaranteed one round though, so how do you extend chain attacks? by breaking elemental orbs. Each element has a paired opposite element, fire is opposite as water, and vice versa. When you attack an enemy during a chain attack, you'll damage these orbs, and you can control which orb you attack and do more damage to said orb by choosing a blade of its opposite typing. So if you want to break a water orb, use a fire blade. If you break an orb, you'll not only do massive damage to the enemy, but also extend the chain attack another round, allowing you to hit them with another 3 specials. And these specials get stronger each round. If you manage to kill the enemy and you're still doing damage to them, you'll get an overkill bonus, where the more you damage them, the more bonus XP you'll get from battle. Naturally, stacking a ton of orbs onto an enemy, then using chain attacks to break them all, is the most effective way to guarantee a kill, and the most satisfying thing to do in this game. I took the final boss from about half health to dead with an overkill bonus using this strategy. It is ridiculously fun to pull off. I can confidently say the chain attacks are handled exceedingly better than in Xenoblade 1. In that game, whenever I started a chain attack, it was to try and force a topple. I was never quite sure where to go from there. 2's system is a vast improvement, providing a clear goal for how to deal massive damage once you activate one. If we go back over everything though, you may notice something. Auto attacks build toward arts, arts build toward specials, specials are used in blade combos, and blade combos set up chain attacks. Everything in this combat system is designed for building toward effective chain attacks. As much fun as those are, they're only useful during tougher enemy encounters, and everything but chain attacks are relatively weak. Unfortunately, 2's arts barely touch the health bar. Instead, it feels like your specials are as powerful as arts in the first game, your arts are as powerful as auto attacks in the first game, and auto attack does such little damage it practically exists just to fill up your arts. All of this results in your normal attacks feeling like they're doing nothing but building to actual attacks, so normal everyday enemies, the ones you'll fight in the hundreds, are a feat of slowly whittling down health bars. Admittedly, I haven't tested the statement to see if it's factually accurate, but I can at least say it feels like they take far longer to kill than enemies of the same type and level in Xenoblade 1 and, spoiler alert, 3. The feel of 2's combat system is a clear improvement on 1, streamlining the arts to be assigned to specific buttons, allowing for weapon switching mid-battle, the game feel of connecting attacks to one another via cancelling, having a set goal for chain attacks. It adds up to a battle system that should outdo the originals. Yet, for everything I love about the feel of this combat system, I can't say I explicitly like it better than 1's, as I only really enjoyed it against the stronger enemies. And that's when those enemies actually let you use all your abilities, a complaint I'll reach later. Moving away from the battle system completely for a bit to focus on the game's most controversial element, the fan service. I'm going to try to keep this segment as short as possible to not move away from the overall focus, but I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up 2's more directly sexual tone compared to 1 or 3. It would be easy to just say Xenoblade 2 sexualizes its female characters, and that's bad, but my feelings are a bit more complicated than that. I believe it's justifiable as an audience member to have lewd thoughts concerning a character specifically because they are fictional. Though as sad as it is I have to clarify this point, this exclusively applies for adult characters with adult bodies. However, I also think there's a difference between finding a character someone else made attractive and creating a character with the express purpose of sexualizing them. As an audience member, you can understand and reason that it's okay to have lewd thoughts surrounding a character because of the fact they're not real. You can recognize the issues with sexualizing real people, where you're putting your own desires before their consent, while also realizing that none of these rules need to apply when thinking of a fictional person, who has no real thoughts or feelings. Just remember, it is imperative you don't start applying the same logic you use for make-believe humans to real ones. Basically, my point is, as long as you keep this difference in mind while thinking about how much you want Rika from Pokemon to step on you, that's not perversion. That's just good taste. As for making a character yourself and then sexualizing them, it may seem like the exact same logic should apply. Your creation won't have any true emotions of its own, so it should be fine to throw in some fan service. But as I noted earlier, I believe there's a difference. When you're the one making the character, you're choosing how to portray them. As an audience member, you're only making a personal choice. As a creator, you're choosing how others will view them. If you choose to steep them in any sort of stereotypes, you are helping to prolong those ideas. If you choose to write a male hero character who's a strong, overly confident lone wolf who refuses help from others, you're adding to the idea that's what masculinity is. If you choose to write an openly lewd female character and use those characteristics as an excuse to focus the camera on her feminine parts, you're aiding the continued objectification of women. Now, that's not to say these cliches are inherently bad either. You can use that same masculine hero well if the story you're writing makes him out to be the villain, or if the story deconstructs that way of thinking, having him see the error of his ways and slowly recognize that's not what makes a man a man. That same purposefully sexual female character can work if you're writing a story that empowers her through her sexuality, and actually executes it well, unlike a lot of stories. Or if you're just straight up writing smut where the point is to be openly lewd. And that's where my issue with Xenoblade 2's fanservice lies. First of all, because it's not tastefully done, but also because sex plays no role in the story. Romance is an important aspect, but none of the central scenes are important to the overarching plot. They're just one-off jokes where the punchline is the female characters being hot. However you feel about overtly fanservice-focused games like Senran Kagura, at the very least those games are upfront about what they are. If that were the intention behind the Xenoblade series as well, I wouldn't be complaining, as I'd simply avoid the games altogether. That's why 2's importunate dedication to showing off women's bodies is so annoying, because that's not the appeal of Xenoblade. I'll fully admit, all 3 Xenoblade games have some more fanservice-y character designs, but there's a massive difference in how 2 treats its female characters versus 1 or 3. 2 has far more designs like this. It includes a whole gacha system where you can summon blade partners, many of which are scantily clad women, and it plays with wacky camera angles and funny boing sound effects to ensure you're aware that there are titties on the screen, and that is intentional. The young Nopon party member, Tora, is my least favorite character in the series. He's one of anime's greatest cliches, the funny pervert character, consistently making sexist remarks. While he's implied to be between 10 to 15 years old himself, the worst aspect of his character is how his perversion is used to make jokes sexualizing his artificial blade Poppy, who appears to be around the same age. For example, the scene where he powers her on shows that Tora has an entire closet full of maid outfits for her, and even designed her settings with a separate maid personality. While these scenes try to make Tora the butt of this joke, having the other characters judge him, Poppy is still dragged into them as Tora finding her cute is the setup. This makes me really uncomfortable. This section could be super long. I could try to explain my thoughts in detail, but this video isn't really supposed to be a nuanced commentary on sexism in media. It's a dumb video where I describe what I like and what issues I had with a couple anime games. If you want to know what my in-depth thoughts are, watch this 40-minute video essay from one Ludaskare, hope I'm pronouncing that right, whom I almost entirely agree with aside from his segment on Morag. Perhaps most notably, I love his statement at the end about being able to enjoy this game, and media in general, while also acknowledging its flaws. But for the sake of keeping things short-ish, my point is simply that fanservice isn't why I play Xenoblade, nor just about anyone who started with one. Xenoblade Chronicles is incredible for its gameplay, plot, music, world building, deeper philosophical themes, and character writing, even including the very same characters 2 sexualizes. Perhaps that's what annoys me the most about this fanservice. Despite all I've said about these scenes and character designs, 2's female characters are otherwise fantastically written. Including unnecessary erotic elements somewhat nullifies how great the female cast is. This egregious fanservice makes the game look like mere waifu bait to those outside the fandom. In fact, it's largely responsible for me avoiding not just 2, but Xenoblade as a whole for some years. Both to the game's credit and detriment, all of this stuff is front-loaded within the first 4 chapters, or at least mainline required scenes that have this more adult material. You may have noticed a running trend after that last statement. The unneeded lewd cutscenes end after Chapter 4, the voice acting improves as the game goes on, you need to reach Chapter 3 to unlock the full battle system, and then you'll need time to get used to it. Xenoblade 2 isn't the kind of game you can pop in and realize the fun in within the first couple chapters. It's a fairly agreed upon statement that the end of Chapter 4 is where the game gets good overall. Many fans consider these first 4 chapters a sort of litmus test to see if you can get through the worst aspects of the game to pull through and see the light. But this comes with the caveat that those who don't progress past chapter 4 are failures, that it's their fault for not being strong enough to withstand the game's shortcomings. As someone who did make it past that trial, I find this concept very stupid. These first 4 chapters out of 10 in a game I spent 115 hours on can still be 20 hours on the lower end to 40 plus. That is an insane amount of time to invest into something to test if you like it. If you suggest a show to a friend, but you tell them that the first season sucks and they've just gotta push through that initial slog to get to the good stuff, you're likely asking them to invest about 26 episodes or less than 13 hours worth of watch time. Here, you're probably asking for double that. And that's active playtime, which is a very different form of consuming entertainment from just sitting back and letting your eyes and ears do all the work. To the game's credit, I will say Chapter 1 is short and does a decent job establishing the world, and Chapter 3 is also a very good chapter that story-wise feels more like 5 through 10. What that means though is that all of these annoying adult cutscenes are compressed into chapters 2 and 4 alone, making these 2 chapters slogs of concentrated cringe. And that's where I find the whole litmus test thing to be dumb, because of course people are going to come away with negative feelings after having to witness all of that. Xenoblade 2 gave itself a bad image by choosing to include these elements within the chapters that introduce players to this game. Anything wrong with the game as a whole can be found here. Chapter 2 occurs before you have access to the chain attack, Chapter 4 has an annoying navigate factory, and both 2 and 4 are rife with terrible voice acting, wacky camera angles, robot children in maid dresses, arcs focused on Torah, etc. I want to clarify that I don't hate everything within these chapters. Heck, I'd say I have a positive opinion of Chapter 2 and a neutral one of Chapter 4. It's simply worth noting that these are the 2 chapters that turn people off from this game's story, before Chapter 5 kicks it up a notch. As much as I'd like to jump into praising the latter half of this game's story now, unfortunately in my opinion Chapter 5 is where we start a trend of the battle system, which up until that point had mostly been building upon itself and only getting better, suddenly faltering with poorly designed bosses. I made these graphs to describe how I feel about Xenoblade 2's story versus gameplay throughout each chapter. Red represents gameplay and green story. And yes, this is the one part of the video where you may actually benefit from looking at the screen. As you can see, the story falters during chapters 2 and 4 during the exact scenes I've described, but from chapter 5 on, it's an upward trend. I would like to discuss the low points on the red chart here. I'll only be describing them from a gameplay standpoint, so I won't be spoiling anything about the story, so you should still be safe if you haven't played Xenoblade 2. But then, why and how did you end up on this video? So I first dropped the red line a bit in chapter 4 because of the annoying factory segment, but I wouldn't say the gameplay gets really annoying until the chapter 5 end boss. The gimmick of this boss is in its rage state, it suddenly does spike damage, where it deals damage to party members that attack it. The existence of spike damage isn't the issue. My problem is that the game never describes this mechanic to you. Xenoblade 1 explicitly told you what spike damage was and how to counter it. 2, it explains that enemies can get stronger during the rage states and acquire special effects, but never once explains the important detail that one of these effects is literally killing you as you attack it. Chapter 6 doesn't have any dreadful bosses I can particularly remember, but Chapter 7 is my least favorite to play in the entire game. Remember how I said I enjoyed the tougher enemies only when they actually let you use all your abilities? Well, first you run through this distinct area that makes building up specials extra difficult, where you fight a boss which can seemingly infinitely clone itself. Eventually I tried chain attacking whichever enemies would start to clone themselves, and I still have no idea if I actually figured out the trick, or if I just got lucky. Unfortunately, the chapter gets worse from there, as you then have to fight a boss that constantly shackles your blade so you can't use lots of specials. This is the one boss in the game where I had to actually pay attention to the bonus effects of blade combos and use a specific elemental order first. Then, after like 5 minutes between passing a bunch of underleveled enemies, that same boss shows up having gained 4 levels, and now you have to fight them with someone else who can repeatedly launch you. So all of the issues with that previous boss fight are present, only now it's worse. And again, these bosses all make it outrageously difficult to use your specials, and getting even a single orb on them is near impossible. I loathe these bosses because it doesn't feel like the game is testing how well you know its mechanics. It's just removing all the tools you have that actually allow you to cause decent damage to the enemy, and expecting you to fight the boss the way you would any typical trash mob, only now the trash mob can obliterate you. A boss in a chess game should test how good you are at chess, not whether you can still win if everything but your pawns and king are instantly taken from you. My advice for this boss? Just lower your difficulty to easy. The end boss of Chapter 7 is terribly unbalanced, unfair, and you have nothing to prove by beating them the real way. Lower your difficulty to easy, fight them, and immediately change the difficulty back to whatever you had it set at once Chapter 8 starts. Trust me, it's not worth it to try and beat them on normal. Chapter 8 isn't too annoying, though there are moments that feel like they're designed to be chase sequences, and those can get a bit annoying. Spoiler alert, Xenoblade 3's dodge mechanic would have been greatly appreciated here. Chapter 9 is also alright, but it has a lot of enemies that can call more enemies to swarm you, so you've got to be very careful where you approach them, because if you run into a group of 3, you may soon find yourself fighting 10. Finally, Chapter 10 has a really annoying part at the beginning, where you're split apart from the rest of your party and have to fight 3 bosses in a row. The first and third aren't terrible, but my strategy was to equip a blade with a special ability to heal your character whenever you're running. This meant these battles were a tedious slog of attacking, running for a bit to get my health bar back up, attacking again, running again, attack, run, you get the idea. The second boss, though, I failed so many times, and eventually the solution I found, by seeking wisdom from the internet, was to get the boss stuck on a bench and slowly whittle their health down with a ranged weapon. Oh, and I forgot to mention, every time you die, you respawn at the top of this stupidly long staircase, and you have to traverse all the way down to fight the previous boss again. Thankfully, the rest of Chapter 10 is fine, and the final boss I found to be fun to fight, like the better designed enemies in this game. Xenoblade 2 is one of the most conflicting games I've played. Its lows are down there with some of the most frustrating gaming experiences for me, but its highs are right up there with Xenoblade 1 and plenty of my favorite childhood franchises. And you know what? Just as I started by listing a bunch of random complaints, I want to end my thoughts on Xenoblade 2 on a more positive note, as I do have a more positive view of this game despite how it may sound so far. It's hardly worth mentioning the music as it's a Xenoblade game, but for the record, yeah, 2's soundtrack is one aspect I have zero qualms with. I feel the cast of 2 is more tightly written as well. There were just a couple of characters in 1 that, admittedly, aren't quite as important to the story. 2 has Tora, who I hate, but it counters him with every other driver and main blade you'll encounter. None of the other important characters feel shallow to me, so in terms of main characters, I'll give 2 the edge over 1. Some people hate on Rex, but to me he's a perfect protagonist. He's the only protagonist that works for this game's story, telling a brilliant message about how pessimism and doubt molds the world into a darker place, but that also means optimism and belief has the opposite effect. It's easy to forget that society is a human concept. We molded our daily lives into the shape they take now, but that means we have the power to change them too. Rex helps the other party members see this light for themselves. The story acknowledges that yes, even the brightest people will give in to despair and feel like giving up sometimes. But because of the positive effect Rex has on the rest of the party, they were able to raise his hopes when he hit that point. It handles the don't give up trope more poignantly than many stories, showing that not everyone can be optimistic 100% of the time, yet countering that as long as we're there for our friends' pitfalls, we can help them through that darkness. We only hit lows we can't crawl out of when nobody around us is willing to carry that torch of optimism. And I think that's a great reminder compared to the unrealistic stay cheerful at all times trope many anime push. I'll also say before getting to 3 that I do think 2 has better locations than its sequel. Each individual titan feels so distinct from the last, and seeing their massive body parts looming over you, realizing that's what you're walking on, it evokes a sense of scale on par with Xenoblade 1's world. I may even argue 2 beats 1 in its visual realizations of the world, but that's more of a debate. The non-visual world building, however, definitely outdoes both 1 and 3. For me, 2 will always have the most interesting and fleshed out mythos. Any question you may have about All Rest is explained either by the main story or side quests, and in classic Xeno fashion, the game does not shy away from the philosophical questions raised by its unique setting and forms of life, and what those questions mean for us in the real world. I think I can summarize my thoughts on Xenoblade 2 by saying, it's the most recent game to release I'd like to eventually get a remake. Not anytime soon, of course. I have no desire to jump into All Rest again, aside from when I play Torna, but I think Xenoblade 2 could be an excellent game with some fixes. Make lesser enemies weaker, redo some of that early game voice acting, rebalance some of the crappier boss fights in the latter half of the game, give us repeatable tutorials that are also written better than the ones we got. There are certain aspects of the game I don't think could be changed, unfortunately, like all of the arcs focused on Tora, but tightening up the gameplay elements could make Xenoblade 2 truly stand alongside 1 and 3, rather than being the series' obvious mainline black sheep. Now then, as this is essentially an add-on to my ranking games videos, I'm going to put Xenoblade 2 on my 2017 list, right behind Splatoon 2. I had a lot of issues with Splatoon 2 at launch, and while I considered putting Xenoblade 2 ahead of it here, I feel pretty confident in saying Splatoon 2 still wasn't quite as flawed at launch as Xenoblade 2 still is. And of course, with the benefit of time, Splatoon 2 grew as a game, to the point where if I were to rank it after Octo Expansion, it may even rank above Mario Odyssey, a game which Xenoblade 2 doesn't stand a chance against, I'm afraid. Now, having discussed Xenoblade 2 at length, I can finally move on to the game that moved me to play it, the culmination of the series, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. You know what, we're going ahead in time style and listing my negatives first. We'll start with the fairly small one. For the most part, Xenoblade 3 runs at a consistent frame rate, much better than its immediate predecessor. Ironically though, my favorite area of the game is also the one that runs the most like Xenoblade 2. This area is massive and intricately designed, which is clearly a bit much for my poor Switch. There were also 3 or 4 times where I was running around and my game just froze entirely for a few seconds, which was scary but incredibly rare considering how much I played. Jumping into the design itself, I think my biggest issue is simply that some quests can be difficult to find, specifically quests that require a specific hero in your party. I'll discuss the hero system a bit further later, but for now all you need to know is that you have a set 6 character party with a 7th slot for heroes you can recruit throughout the story. Some quests require specific heroes, which isn't an issue on its own, but finding these quests can be. Most new quests are indicated via a question mark symbol on the map. With certain hero quests though, this indicator won't appear unless you already have the hero in your party and are within the region the quest starts. Now for a lot of heroes this isn't an issue, as you simply have to go back to where you met them for their quests. For example, Xion is the commander of Colony 9, so I knew I had to go back to Colony 9 for his quest. However, there are some late game heroes who don't have a clear location you need to visit, so you basically just need to get lucky and have them in your party when you visit said locale. There are also a few quests where you need to meet obscure requirements for them to be activated. In particular, Colony Iota quests have a lot to do with the Collectopedia mechanic, so you need to regularly check and complete certain Collectopedia cards for the quest to even start. There's no indication you need to do this though. You either have to regularly use Collectopedia cards enough to notice, or use a guide. My last little complaint involves the actual battle system itself. Xenoblade 3 added this neat little indicator to show you where you are in relation to the enemy you're targeting. This is an excellent addition and one I would have loved in Xenoblade 2. Unfortunately though, whereas it would have been nice to have in the second game, it feels absolutely necessary in 3. Because you have 6 or 7 party members at all times, it's very easy to lose track of the enemy you're targeting. While fighting bigger enemies or ones that clearly stand out, it's fine, but battling groups of enemies, especially groups of humanoid enemies, can make it incredibly difficult to see who it is you're attacking. I think this could be solved pretty easily though. Like many games, if your character gets really close to the camera, they'll turn transparent so you can see through them. I think we could simply add a toggle to turn on this transparency for your teammates during battle. That way you could focus on the enemies easier without your own party members blocking the view. Now with my gripes out of the way, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is potentially my favorite in the series. I knew I was gonna like this game more than 2 the second I saw a bathhouse scene, and the camera didn't bombard me with wacky camera angles. 3 took the aspects that worked from 1 and 2 and left behind the issues each of those games presented. For example, quests in 3 are the best they've ever been. They keep the actual story significance presented in 2, but don't go on forever. I mean, in a game this large, there are of course a few stinkers, but for the most part, longer quest lines are split up into multiple pieces, so you can complete a quest, get your reward, and wait a bit longer before returning to start the next quest in the sequence. Having an optional line that guides you to where you need to be is also a very big help and much more helpful than 2's compass system. Actually, I'd say 3's side content is far more important than in either of the other games. They expand upon every major character you meet and reveal new aspects of the world that would go completely unnoticed in the main story. No side quests in either of the other 2 games felt completely necessary, but in 3 the quest delved into interesting aspects of the world of Ionios so well that I felt compelled to do all of them. I beat Xenoblade 1 with 99 hours, and upon reaching the final chapter, I ignored all of the final late game quests, as by that point I was ready to wrap things up. The second game took me 115 hours, and my point of exhaustion came even sooner. I eventually decided I didn't even want to complete the quests I had registered, and chose to beat the final boss and be done. In Xenoblade 3, I completed the final side quest, realized, well, crap, guess there's nothing left to do but go fight the final boss now, and beat the game at about 139 hours. I then sunk an additional 5 hours into post-game content, and that was before DLC. What's most important is how the combat feels though, and this is where I will undoubtedly say 3 outdoes both of the other games. 1's combat system was fun, but it's easy to see it was the first iteration of this real-time strategy approach for Monolith. The menu is a tad clunky, and as stated earlier, chain attacks didn't feel quite as fleshed out. And of course, I dedicated a huge chunk of this video to discussing how 2's combat system prioritizes chain attacks too much, and therefore all your main attacks feel like slapping an elephant with a pencil. Xenoblade 3 though does this crazy thing where your normal arts actually do significant damage. 3's combat UI is the same as 2's, where your arts are mapped to individual buttons, and it has a similar game feel where you're rewarded for timing your arts when the auto attack hits. This will increase how much you fill up your talent art, which is 3's version of special attacks. Except now the talent art really is a stronger move meant to do massive damage to the enemy, rather than a move that merely does the same amount of damage as a normal art in the first game. TLDR, the moves you're using 95% of the game actually do damage again. In Xenoblade 1, your arts recharge automatically over time. In 2, you had to land auto attacks. 3 uses both these concepts, with half the characters recharging arts like the first game, and half needing to attack like the second. You can choose whichever method you prefer by playing as a class that uses said playstyle. I mentioned how 2's decision to halt auto-attacking while moving felt a bit awkward and risky. 3 copies this decision to auto-attack only while standing still, yet adds a dodge mechanic that allows you to quickly move where you want, so you don't feel like you're taking a risk simply by moving to the enemy's side. This change also allows positioning-based attacks to have just as much value as in 1, whereas 2 made them seem like somewhat of a risk. Because you have a set party and heroes are unplayable, 3's option for customizing your party's movesets is to allow you to unlock the classes of your heroes. Every playable character in the game can unlock every other character in hero's class, and each character has an individual rank for each class in the game. Leveling up a class ranking can allow that character to assign said class arts to the D-pad, increasing each character's total arts to 6, and even unlocking fusion arts, in which the effects of 2 arts, one from your current class and another from the D-pad, are combined. I discovered a combination that allows me to both break and topple an enemy at the same time around level 50 or so, and decided, yeah, I'm using this during the final boss. Speaking of break and topple, both the break topple daze and break topple launch smash combos are back from 1 and 2 respectively, with the daze route ending a 4th burst step. These work just like in those games, with the smash route focused more on massive damage, and the burst route focused more on inflicting the enemy with status effects. In both of the previous games, the most desired mechanic was the ability to switch party members so you could force them to use an art that continues these combos, and Xenoblade 3 finally adds that option. Ironically though, I think this game needs it the least out of any of them, as the AI partners seem much better at continuing combos than in either Forerunner. On top of that, you have the Ouroboros forms, which combine two party members, temporarily boosting your attack and preventing you from dying entirely. You have so many options and improvements in the base combat system, so things don't feel entirely centered around chain attacks, even if they are still your main form of dealing damage to bigger enemies. Because the rest of the combat system isn't just there to build up to a chain attack now, chain attacks themselves are more self-contained. First, you'll pick a party member's chain order, a special attack which causes a certain effect. You'll then be given a list of your party members and the ability to use one of their arts. Each of your party members and your hero have a certain amount of tension points, or TP they'll grant for using them, and that TP will be added to your total. Once you use a member though, they're removed from the pool. Upon hitting 100% TP or above, you'll perform the chain order you picked, one party member or hero will be added back into your pool, and you'll continue to the next round. Hitting 150 TP will recover 2 heroes, and hitting 200 plus TP will grant 3. Of course, if you fail to hit 100 TP in any round, the chain attack will end. Each round your damage is multiplied more, allowing for insane damage to your enemy. Furthermore, each hero has a particular effect when you choose one of their arts. Playing with different heroes to see what sorts of colossal numbers you can hit is devilishly fun. My personal favorite hero adds 150% to their own TP if you use them to hit the 100% or higher TP threshold. This means if you can keep activating them, you can hit insane TP numbers, thus multiplying your damage and EXP bonus by that amount. It's incredibly fun to hit something like 500 plus TP by the end. I got so addicted to this combat, I never started to feel fatigued doing it like I did in Xenoblade 2. Actually, by about mid-chapter 4, I was over-leveled enough I stopped cashing in my bonus EXP from side quests and decided to level up solely from regular combat. From that point on, I just built my EXP up and up until I was ready for the final area, where I cashed it in all at once and went from level 75 straight to 90. Xenoblade 3 is smart because it hides this level grinding behind class grinding. You get far more points for your class rank by fighting enemies at equal or higher levels than you. So by fighting these enemies to grind my class ranks, I was naturally grinding my normal level higher. Often it would rise without me meaning to make it. Even so, I never got bored. I never felt like I was wasting my time with the grinding, because combat is so fun on its own, I didn't mind having to grind. And somehow, I haven't mentioned the main draw of an RPG, the story. 3's story does seem to be a bit more controversial, as it's definitely a more straightforward story than its older siblings. The other games have some crazy plot twists, and 3 has a few, but for the most part it's more predictable. This naturally has led to some criticism, but as for me, I loved it. One critique is based on the fact it isn't nearly as focused on world building as the other two. I get why this world building is passed over, because no one has had time to question the world they're in. It'll be obvious to those who played the previous games that many of the characters are High Entia, Machina, Blade, Skurmati, and so on. However, to them, they're all just human. With only 10 years to live, and all of that time spent fighting, none of the characters have had time to question the world, to notice the different races, the history of their lands, why their world consists of giant corpses, or even what it is they're fighting for in the first place. Everyone is stuck fighting for reasons they don't understand, so Ionios remains stagnant, never progressing until our party finally awakens and does something about it. The villains, Mobius, are also criticized. There are 2 main complaints I see: that Mobius as a whole don't feel unique, and that their leader is uninteresting. Let's start with the former, the complaints that most of Mobius are uninteresting as villains. I think a lot of these complaints stem from the Mobius members we fight at the end of many of the game's side quests. Mobius is a big group with 25 to 26 members, but only some of those are met along the game's main path. To me, this isn't an issue, because most of these enemies aren't really supposed to leave an impact. Their main purpose is just to show off another way that Mobius are just completely irredeemable, and to provide an obstacle for one of the game's optional hero characters. To me, these quests don't need to have compelling villains because Mobius aren't the point of the quests. The point is to introduce or expand upon an individual in our party and to expand the lore of the overall world. The Mobius members we fight at the end of these quests are more comparable to the end bosses of one of Xenoblade 2's Blade quests, which I doubt anyone would argue are supposed to be memorable to any degree. Or in the first game, it'd be like if there were a series of longer side quests which all ended in you fighting a Mechon that's equal in power to Zord. Honestly, I think that would have been pretty sick. So I think some ended up overinflating the importance of these mere side quest Mobius in their heads, and therefore it decreased their respect for Mobius as a whole. I obviously disagree with this because I recognize that these characters were never meant to serve as anything but another douchebag to take down, a role they fulfilled perfectly. If you look at the Mobius you fight on the main path though, D, K, J, N, and so on, that's where you'll find the Mobius we're supposed to care about. And I do think all of these enemies are wonderful as more than just mere obstacles. You could argue that K and O and P fall into the other category of Mobius that do exist just to be scumbags, but the set pieces and lead up to their fights are so incredible that they earn their place right alongside J and N, even if they aren't as interesting as those more sympathetic characters. Now as for the other complaint about Mobius Leader, this is one I can agree with to a slim degree. The past main enemies we've gotten have typically been present throughout the whole story in some form or another, and many of these big twists I mentioned earlier are related to our antagonists. The leader of Mobius, however, is part of the reason 3's story seems more straightforward, because they aren't really a twist villain of any kind. They're certainly not as fleshed out as our past foes, and yeah, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hoping for a little more intrigue with their character. However, given the game's themes, I do think it's fitting to take that character in the direction chosen, and the final battle against them itself was enough to make up for their more simplistic role. While I'm on the topic of criticisms I disagree with, I've seen some claim the cutscene music isn't as good as the previous entries as it all sounds like the same song. I don't disagree with the notion there are more songs using the same leitmotifs here, but it seems to me the difference between the prior games and 3's is that 3 has multiple renditions of one song written for individual specific cutscenes, rather than use the same song in multiple instances. For example, you'll see the song Elysium in the Blue Sky used in plenty of 2's cutscenes. In 3, it's like if they took its version of Elysium and, instead of inserting it into different cutscenes, took its melodies and arranged individual pieces for the cutscenes it would have appeared in. This results in multiple songs that sound the same because they are essentially the same song, but reorganized to perfectly match what they're synced up to, in order to avoid any slightly awkward transitions between songs, which both 1 and 2 did have in rare occasions. There's so much more one could say about this game's story, about the purposeful hamminess of the bosses showcasing how little they care about death, the numbness to death to the point where dead bodies are treated like a collectible, the themes and callbacks to previous titles, the expertly written characters which in fact I would consider my favorite main cast. I think there are plenty of video essayists who could explore all of that far better than I ever could though. So to neatly condense what I got out of Xenoblade 3's story, change can be scary, but it's necessary. It's normal to want to keep doing what you've been doing, even if you know it's imperfect, but you can't keep things that way forever. Eventually, one needs to wake up, look around, and ask themselves if they're really happy with the state of the world or if they want to change it. Yet, a stagnant world can prevent those thoughts from happening. Born into a world of strife, it's easy to fall into the trap of accepting things as the way they've always been and the way they'll always be. This mindset, however, is part of the problem. We as individuals and a society must look beyond what we're presented with for solutions. We must seize our destiny ourselves, regardless of how terrifying it might be to leave the current system behind, even when it's killing us. In a world of unnecessary, manufactured conflict, the first step to moving forward is to remove what's keeping the world stagnant in the first place, to allow future generations to live in the world free from our current pointless squabbles. In the end, I'm not sure whether Xenoblade 1 or 3 is my favorite, but I can definitively say that Xenoblade 3 has the best gameplay in the entire series. The feel of Xenoblade 2's combat system with the power of attacks of ones makes for a combat system that's fun to play without the issues either of those games presented. I'm not gonna say where it lands on my 2022 game ranking list quite yet, but you can bet it's gonna be pretty high. Even though I had my issues with 2, I'm glad I played it. Playing through a game makes for a more memorable experience, and I now feel more well versed on the whole series lore. The battle system wasn't nearly as scary as I expected it to be, and in fact it helped me feel more comfortable stepping into 3. Although 3 is easily the more preferable game for me, I did love both of them, and now I can happily say I love Xenoblade as a whole. Or at least the mainline games.